Thank you all again for joining us today. What I'm going to do is play a video for you that I hope many of you have already seen. Actually, I'm going to go out and come back in again real quick. One sec. All right. I think we should be good. A video that many of you have probably seen before, but if you haven't, a little warning about it. Grab a tissue, because you just might need it. So hopefully I'm not the only one that, got teary-eyed again on that. But there's a reason we wanted to share that at the beginning. Those of you who have seen presentations I've done or been part of the last couple of years, have been following our webinars, you know that I've talked a lot about the need and the opportunity and for our communities to evolve and better meet the needs of today's and tomorrow's prospects. And how do we stay relevant? And we know that integrated health and wellness is really important to that. And we know that we really need to foster environments that support meaning and purpose in people's lives. And that video, to me, it's all about meaning and purpose. I'm not really sure of that timeline. Like the way you look at the seasons through this guy working out, almost felt like a 2-year commitment to being able to lift his granddaughter or great-granddaughter up to the top of the tree. But it's amazing. And that's what we're really here to talk about today, is ways that we can really bring more meaning to our communities and to our residents today, tomorrow, and the years ahead. So really excited about this today. With us this morning, I'm just going to run through briefly, and each of these people will give them an opportunity to give a little bit more about their backgrounds as we go. But we're really excited about the panel this morning. Dan Hermann's going to lead us off with conversation about growth opportunities in the field and kind of that vision for the future and what opportunities really are for us today. Joining Dan from Ziegler is Caitlin. My understanding is Dan's going to need to step out right around 1 o'clock Eastern, maybe a couple minutes ahead of that. So Caitlin will be staying on after that. If there are any questions when we get to the Q&A part that she may be able to answer on on Dan's behalf. Really excited to have Jill here. For those of you, let's see, I can't see myself, so I can't tell. Let me look around here if this is in focus. All right, I probably shouldn't try with that. But anyway, what I'm trying to do is hold up a copy of Jill's book, Disrupting the Status Quo of Senior Living. And if you haven't read it yet, I think by the end of today's session, you will want to go out and get a copy of it and read that. It was extremely influential to me as I did that. So we really welcome Jill. Andy Carle. Worked with Andy for years now on university retirement communities. He's going to have a lot of insights to share there. And Ted, the concept of longevity communities. We've been talking with Ted for the last couple of years. We're really excited that he's able to join us today and share some of his ideas as well. But I really see that commonality through all of this is meaning and purpose. So with that, I'm going to drop out of the literal slide mode because we're going to, as we said, really focus on discussion from this point on. But Dan, I'd like to turn to you to lead it off before we go to our panelists and talk about their specific models that they're promoting and those. I've heard you talk so much and it's just really had an impact on me about what's happening in our field, what the opportunities are, not just the demographics, but the for-profit, not-for-profit, dynamic that's going on right now, the opportunity for growth, and why your thoughts on why communities should be aggressively focusing on growth now, and why, as they do, if you agree with this statement and premise, that they need to focus not on just replicating what they've done in the past, but on evolving to meet the needs of tomorrow's residents. So I'd love to hear your big picture thoughts on the growth opportunities for our field and what those mean to you and what you're seeing.
Thanks, Robin. Appreciate being on board and wonderful to be with this esteemed panel. So this should be a great discussion as we've done in the past. And sorry, I have to drop off at the end. I'm at a similar panel in Washington around age tech that happened to overlap. That's right next door, which is nice. But I'll try and boil this down in the 5 minutes you suggested. And when I do this, we want to keep in mind a number of themes. One is the demographics that we've all seen. So we show the chart routinely showing 50% growth from 2025 to 2035. So we don't need to focus further than that, everyone. We get people asking us about, should we build? What's going to happen in 30 years? I can promise you we're only at 10% penetration rate for income qualified, age and income qualified, 10%. So for the other speakers, please tie that in all of our challenges about the future boomer. That super wealthy boomer that wants to push on longevity is going to do that on their own with all the science and precision that I know Ted will mention. But in our communities that you're serving, Rob, right now with those demographics, and the cliff that just hit that you're an expert on, or the stair step up, they are experiencing the highest occupancy in decades, and the supply is limited. So along those lines, our friends at NIC, where our colleague Lisa McCracken went and has even supercharged NIC further, they're broadcasting the shortage of, call it 700,000 to 800,000 units by 2030 to maintain 10%. Now that means there's 90% out there that are residing at home and in other settings. So we're only 10% for this whole not-for-profit and for-profit product flow but it ranges by community. So Caitlin lives in Harrisburg. She and I were just in Lancaster. My God, it's 1/3, we think, 25% to 1/3. Communities are everywhere. They're out in farm fields. They're full. Then you go to other markets and it might be 5%. So everyone remember, it is very local market dependent. We have to always adjust and not sweep across the country nationally, and very unique to particular markets. So Jill in Denver, for example, knows that's a 90% plus market, for-profit market, where Lancaster, where Caitlin and I just were, is majority not-for-profit. So it varies market by market. But on your growth question, with the demographics, it's de-risk our everyone's ability to grow on the not-for-profit side, because you should be able to fill if you can move through construction with reasonable construction pricing. And that's what's happened around the country, principally on expansions. So what our not-for-profit clients in the sector has done extremely well, really well, everyone gets an A or an A plus, is expansions of existing communities where the brand's been established in their markets. And those are going phenomenal. So tomorrow we'll price a $360 million expansion for Deerfield Retirement Community in Asheville, North Carolina. They have 1,000-person waiting list. They've been working on it for years. It's complex. You got to get zoning, et cetera. They're 70% sold in a 6-month window. That, in my opinion, will sell out fairly quickly right after financing and be a rapid fill. And we're seeing that all over the country. So we'll do about $4 billion in capital this year for senior living. 3.5 billion of that fixed, about $500 million bank, and I'd say 75% is on expansions. The balance is on a handful of new communities, and that's where our not-for-profits are doing an okay job, but it varies dramatically by the providers on who has the risk appetite to pursue new locations, because you have to get the land, you have to get the zoning. Jill, I'm looking at you. How hard is it to get land in Denver? You have to get, and they're competing on data centers and all this other new construction. And we have folks saying, yeah, we'll work on new locations. And we agree, you should. Satellites and so on. Try and keep it a little more simple, or do a full new campus. But it's hard for people to do that while they're doing these large expansions. And the other big driver is affiliations and acquisitions. So the 3 channels that people are going through are expansions, affiliations and acquisitions, and then new locations. But the new locations are very limited. And the for-profit side right now is very limited, as you've heard us say, Rob, because the bank market tightened after Silicon Valley Bank. That's now more than 2.5 years ago. And the for-profit market, if you go to all of their conferences, Nick and the Interface conferences, are all waiting. They said, survive through 25, new sticks in 26. But it won't be 100% of what it was before Silicon Valley. So it'll be a trickle out on new for-profit IL memory care. And that just presents you, everyone listening, phenomenal opportunity to grow small, medium, big expansion, or new satellite, or new campus, and have a head start where these demographics are profound. So that's why it's not just about creating any business activity for us or developers. It's because it's such a profound opportunity that you have a really good 10-year window over the management tenures of most of the people on the phone. While you're doing that, scale does matter, but it matters in your individual markets. You have to go from large metro to medium metro to small metro to smaller towns and rural. You don't have to be part of a big multi-campus system. We have plenty of healthy single sites, 2-3 campus systems up to big ones. What you do want to do is be the leader in your primary market so that you drive the economics to survive and thrive. And some of the affiliations going on are from weaker organizations joining stronger. And then the stronger ones that are creating scale are creating new, they are adding management team members now, again, that can oversee growth across the channels I said, plus HCBS. So if you can picture a very large system that has the resources, they could have head of construction and project management on expansion, somebody to coordinate new campus, somebody to focus on M&A and acquisitions, and somebody on HCBS. It's hard to do all of that, but we do have good example systems doing really well in each of those areas. And then as they get bigger, they can add multiple players. But again, just focus on being the leader in your market and maximizing your market. And then when you get to the longevity piece, what's being built, like the Deerfield reference, and we also priced an expansion on Larkfield Place in Wichita today. They're building fresh, new, quality, IL-centric, wellness-centric, holistic, lifestyle-centric, with a focus on aging in place with any services coming in. So people are doing that through the expansions, and then they're coming back in and retrofitting or retooling what they have. But I would, as the other speakers speak, remember we're speaking about the 10% that are in the communities and the 90% that aren't. And Rob, I've been saying if we just move up 1 or 2%, the volume needed would be monstrous. So what's actually going to happen is we'll probably drop to 9.5 or 9% penetration by 2030 because the market can't keep up. And the product being built by the not-for-profits in particular is fresh, wellness-centric. So I don't think they're missing that for the folks that are coming into our newer product from big metro down to small metro. And they're all trying to add all the elements to serve that wellness-centric resident. We just were down for the grand opening of C Fields, which merged into Bishop Gadsden. And we have dozens and dozens and dozens of phenomenal clients. So I don't want to leave anyone out. But if anyone wants to see a wellness-centric campus geared to the individual at every level of care, Bishop Gadsden in Charleston is a phenomenal example. And they're 100% full. And they're adding a full swimming pool for lap swimming, for example, but every level of care is wellness centric. Now, can everyone do that? No, but you can attempt in your particular markets to get there. But we can't forget towns of 100,000 are different than Metro Chicago or Metro Atlanta, for example. So you have to adjust across the board. So hopefully I hit the themes you wanted to hear. But I'm sorry, one more thing on the for-profit side. Those managers out there are younger at the operator side, generally speaking. They understand serving the holistic senior, but the average entry age of rentals has not changed. It continues to be 84 to 86, midpoint 85. The average entry age of the fresh, modern, not-for-profit, which is loaded with couples at 50 to 60%, is still in that 78 to 80 for the fresh new product. So that is a big differentiator that everyone needs to remember. That senior that folks speak to on the longevity front in the rental side is an older senior. It's our entry fee, not-for-profit clients are attracting that 80-year-old. And that's where that stair step is right now. So I'll stop there, given your time, and come back with questions. And Caitlin and I can cover all the same points, so she'll hit them all if she needs to.
Great, thank you. There are two things that you touched on there that I just want to go back and revisit real quick as we start to transition into our other panelists. The first is you talked about there's so much growth from now until 2035. We don't need to think beyond that. Let's go after and get that opportunity. And obviously that's correct. But one thing that was interesting that I saw for the first time at your fall conference this year, in one of the data slides you all presented, your team presented, was a projection of the age 75 and older population through the end of the century.
Right.
And I can't tell you how many CEOs or CFOs have been caught, our field tends to be a little bit cautious, have said, well, I don't want to build all this for the boomers and then have empty buildings because there aren't enough of the next generation. And so I think that growth of the population beyond 2035 was something that really struck me as important for everyone to be aware as well.
Yeah, and I'll comment on that, and people can write me and challenge us. I would disagree with everyone, and we have investors, anyone that points that out, the investors bringing it up. You guys, everyone, we're at 10% penetration. The bigger question for everyone is, will something be invented or changed that keeps seniors in their home that choose to get communal interaction in a different way? And I just don't see what that can be. The folks that's why Lancaster is so much higher. Those are Mennonite brethren individuals who enjoy being together, as an example. And if we just move to 8 or 9% of these seniors, the buildings are all going to be filled. I think we're going to actually have a crisis on how many, and everyone on this call can say, how many phone calls do you get from seniors where they're boxed out because the waiting list is too long? I get them all the time in St. Louis or Chicago or other places. It's an easy comment to say we're going to plateau, but none of us can even say what the makeup of the population will be. What will the racial makeup be? Will different racial groups that currently don't choose senior living start to choose it? Nobody's done that study yet. So we're only at 1 in 10 for the industry. That's why your for-profit brethren this is super important. They are lined up with equity, ready to deploy it because the senior living asset class is now a traditional real estate asset class. They're literally standing by. There was over 400 people from financial institutions and private equity at the last NIC conference. They're waiting for banks, the Fed to cut about 2 more times to make the math work on the mix of equity with bank debt to start new construction again. The REITs, Healthcare REIT and Ventas, or Welltower and Ventas stocks are near all-time highs because the performance of ILAL memory care is so strong. We're not thinking it through enough, Rob. So I'm going to ask you, focus on the total penetration rate. That's the question. And remember, every senior housing property frees up housing for the general population. And that's the argument that's starting to resonate in those places where people can't get zoning because we have a traditional housing crisis now.
Right. And that is the second point that I wanted to bring up, which I think is a great transitional point into our other panelists here. And that's the other 90%, because I think all three, Andy, Ted, and Jill, what they're going to be sharing with us here are ways to expand that reach, to have a product that more people want to be part of. So looking forward, I think that's a great note to transition off of. So what we're going to do for our audience, I'm going to ask each of the three other panelists to first go through briefly what we call their origin story. What inspired them to go down the path that each of them has been moving on? And then we'll come back to all three again and let each one delve in more detail. So big picture overview to start with, then we'll come back and visit things in a little bit more detail. So the origin story, the roughly 3 minutes or so. Andy, how about we start with you? Because I think you're focused on retirement communities that are associated with colleges and universities. It's probably the most well-known concept of the three of you out there. But can you share a little bit about what led you to really focus on that opportunity to develop stronger relationships between senior living and higher education?
Sure, and it's kind of a triangulation. In the early 2000s, I joined the faculty at George Mason University as an executive in residence, but I'm also a senior living executive by training. And then actually before senior living, I was a director of strategic planning and marketing for vertically integrated healthcare systems. So long story short, I learned that there were these senior living communities at that time that had kind of connected with universities, some intentionally, some organically. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. It kind of ties into everything I do. Spent about a year visiting them, learning about them, seeing what they were doing right, what they were doing wrong. Decided that this might have real strategic potential. So, the bottom line on these URCs, or University Retirement Communities, is they represent a significant strategic opportunity for universities, for senior living overall. I mean, we can discuss, there's only 3 adaptive strategies for any business: expand, stabilize, or contract, right? And a contraction, nobody wants to do. Stabilize or status quo, as Jill knows, doesn't work in the long run because someone's going to evolve and steal your market share. Or as Dan pointed out, there's other market share. Even if you want to do status quo, why aren't you tapping into that 90% that's untapped? So that's what these URCs are all about, and I'm happy to talk about them. But basically, I concluded some 20 years ago that these things really work. They have tremendous potential, tremendous demand above and beyond. When you put a better product on the shelf, people line up. And that's what we're seeing with these URCs. They open up a whole new market opportunity, let alone, even if you believe in status quo, there's only two types of market share, that's untapped and that you steal. So these URCs come in, they pretty rapidly become the number one choice in the market, and the status quo communities are fighting for second place. So a whole variety of reasons why you should be looking at these, and I'm happy to talk about it.
Great, thanks. Well, we'll come back and hit that in a little more detail. For now, Ted, we'll hand the baton off to you. I know you had a very personal story. I'm not sure how much you want to go into that, but what led you to the idea of the need for longevity communities?
Well, thank you, Rob, and hi, everybody. 7 years ago, I was the CEO of Touchtown, and many of you use or have used Touchtown, the engagement technology. And I had the life-changing event of having a quintuple bypass surgery. And most people say that's bad, but in reality, it's really good because I'm still here 7 years later. I didn't have a heart attack, and I didn't die of a heart attack. And the reason why I knew I had a problem is because I had a calcium score test, which is a CT. And if you haven't had one, I recommend that you have one because it could save your life. But what I did, certainly after my quintuple bypass, is I really transformed my lifestyle pretty significantly. I invested in learning the underlying science of longevity, and I discovered something called scientific wellness, which I'll talk more about. But the whole idea is I really learned a lot, and I changed my life, and I realized that was hard to do, right? And the idea is if you could, in life, if you make something easier, more people will do it. In Amazon, if you click one button to buy, more people buy. So, and if you make something more fun, more people will do it. So all of us want to live healthier, happier, and longer, but it's hard and it isn't necessarily fun. So I thought back to senior living, and senior living has a problem because 90% of people don't want to live in senior living because they view it as the place you go to die. And I don't believe that. I believe it's life plan communities are fabulous places to live longer and happier, but the perception is that we've all dealt with it's the place you go to die. So I thought, if people really believe that you go to this senior living community or you go to this community, and instead of the place you go to die, it's the place that makes it easier and more fun for you to do what you need to do to live healthier, happier, and longer, that's going to be more attractive. You're going to get more than 10% interested. And you also have a situation where you want to be able to serve people in the surrounding community and help them live healthier, happier lives. And so, but in terms of branding, senior living, I think the term senior living is fundamentally, the brand is flawed because so many people view it as the place you go to die. So I came up with the concept of longevity communities. So that's a new category, the place you go leveraging scientific wellness as opposed to wellness. And I'll talk about that a little later. Leveraging scientific wellness, which gives you measurability, the impact of the programming that you're doing, and personalized medicine or precision medicine to make it easier and more fun for people to live healthier, happier, and longer lives.
Great. Thank you very much. And again, appreciate you being here. Jill, not sure I should save the best till last, but because I don't want to offend anybody else. But there is a reason I save your story, because I think it's going to be a great transition into the additional detail we go into. But before we do that, please share a little bit about how you arrived at the need for citizenship model communities.
Sure. So I've been in this field, my goodness, almost 30 years now, and have been leading communities. And when I started, I had come out of a master's degree program at a hotel school. And so I always looked at my communities as like hotels or resorts or cruise ships, if you will, where my job was to make sure we served people well, right? That people didn't have to lift a finger, and we took care of everything for everybody. And it was probably 10 or 15 years ago, and really start at my community. We started really looking at longevity. We started looking at what do you need to live a long and healthy life? And guess what? There is nothing out there that says to live a long and healthy life, you should put your feet up and be served. We started working with the Eden Alternative and really understanding person-directed care. We started thinking really about ageism and the negative ways we look at aging, and started really realizing that whole treating people as customers, instead of how may I help you, is actually how may I harm you, right? Because we're doing all of these things that take away meaningful purpose, that perpetuate the idea that when we get older, we have nothing left to give back and we should just be recipients of care and services. And so I really started having this awakening. And I think the icing on the cake was my husband and I got trapped at a resort after a hurricane. And it was amazing to me to see how all of these team members at this resort were doing everything they could to keep us safe and take care of us, and how quickly we were institutionalized. And so it really all kind of came together over time that we need to stop with this whole idea of this is all about customer service and really focus on, as we get older, we deserve to be citizens as we have been our whole lives and have meaningful purpose, an opportunity to give back, and communities where we belong.
Great, thank you. And so that, as I shared right when we kicked off today, I think the common theme that runs through everything that we're talking about with Andy, Ted, and Jill here today is that need to have meaning and purpose in your life at any stage of life, including that stage that we serve the most. You know, for Jill, the entire driver behind the citizenship model is empowering purpose in daily lives. For university retirement communities, it's that excitement of lifelong learning, engagement of being part of the university college atmosphere that makes people want to get out of bed in the morning. And for longevity communities, that's where I come back maybe the most to that video we watched at the beginning. That goal of staying strong, mentally alert and active throughout your life, so you can lift your granddaughter or your great-granddaughter, up to put the star at the top of the tree. Just think that those are really all ways of looking at the same thing. And that's how do we inspire meaning and purpose in the lives of those we've served. And by the way, I don't want to forget to mention this, but we have blogs that Andy, Ted, and Jill were all kind enough to draft for us. You can find them on the Love and Company website in the blog section, and they will all be in our upcoming issue of our 2026 Senior Housing Trends publication. That should be available in early January. So stay tuned for those. If any of these ideas you want to explore some more, you can go and read the blogs that they've written. So I think as we shift into talking with each of you more about the individual models, the big picture for our attendees is, one of two things. Either how can they take an existing community and evolve it to embrace one or more of these models, or how, if they're planning a startup community or a satellite or anything like that, how the concept can be integrated into those communities. So either developing something new or transforming something existing. That's kind of the main focus we want to go over with our audience today. So I will go through the speakers kind of one by one. We'll sort of do sideways order from where we just went. But I've invited all of the speakers to chime in at any time as we talk through this with any thoughts they have on any of the others' models, reinforcing, clarifying, whatever. So Jill, I got a little bit of theme here of the last show go first. So keeping up with that idea of meaning, tell us a little bit more in detail about what it really means to be a citizenship model community. What is it? Maybe some good examples about how you've been really able to increase meaning and purpose in residents' lives. And I think you've also, with what you've done, you've worked to build that in your staff's lives as well, really integrating them into it.
Well, I I think the first thing was the realization that we can't create meaning for people, right? And I was always like, let's create meaningful experiences. Meaningful experiences, just like that video that you showed at the beginning, has to come from a person having a purpose for doing the thing, right? Like the gentleman in that video wanted to get stronger so he could lift up his granddaughter. So here's what we really do. We're a multi-site organization, and it might be tempting to say, hey, all of you communities, here's exactly what you're going to do to drive the citizenship model. But that is the opposite of what citizenship is about, right? The people that live and work in our communities are the people that have the answers. And so examples, we ask every community every year to come up with how are they going to move this model forward? How are they going to keep evolving? Because that's the other thing that's really important is you're never done with this work. This is transformational kind of work. And so some examples that the communities have come up with are, our Holly Creek campus, for example. Now we all know there's resident ambassador programs at many communities where you welcome new residents. Theirs is and they have that too, but what they just started this year is there are residents who are ambassadors to our new team members. So folks that live in the community, should they want to, they are paired up with new team members, and their job is to help those new team members feel comfortable, learn the ropes, start to feel that success. And if they have questions or worries, they can talk with that resident that's been there a while. That's been really, really successful. So that's what it looks like at Holly Creek, just as an example. There's tons of things happening there. Our Claremont Park campus, the residents decided, why are we paying landscaping companies to come in and plant all the flowers when we have master gardeners and people who love gardening? And so there's a group of folks that take that on, and they design all of the plantings, and they make it happen, and they take care of the gardens. And it brings back meaning to something. Like if you go to a community and you're like, those are beautiful gardens, it kind of ends there. But if the people that live there created it, it adds new meaning. So it looks really different everywhere. And what I would really say is it comes down to asking people, not just selling people on what will you get if you come here, but asking people, what are the gifts and talents and passions you want to bring to make this community stronger and better? And then the other really powerful question is, where do you want to be? What do you want to learn next? Because we often treat people as just who they are in the past. So those are just a few examples of how some of these things come to life in the communities. And it's always changing and always getting better.
So as you went through this evolution yourself from being the ED focused on hospitality, to this realization that, doing harm instead of doing good, totally inadvertently. But how did that evolution work for you? Like, what thoughts, what obstacles did you run into along the way that others listening today should be aware of if they want to do something similar?
Well, it was bumpy, right? And I was working with a group of resident leaders and our team we really just looked at this isn't right, what we're doing. And so how do we start to evolve that? And one of the things that I realized is, we call ourselves communities, and we had a sign that said Claremont Park Life Plan Community in front of our building, but we weren't a community. And we don't spend time learning how to be community builders. And so that was one of the things we had to work on as a group. And the residents pushed me. And the team pushed me, and we pushed each other. And so for me, it was going from a place of being, I'm the manager here, almost like a hotel GM, to I'm like a mayor. And my dad used to be the mayor of our little town. And a mayor's job is to provide for infrastructure, right? So you provide all the things that a community needs to work, to function. And then the second job, just as important, is to build the social fabric and bring out the best in everyone, and really constantly asking yourself, is this something I should be deciding? Is this something that I should be driving? Or what other voices are missing, and how might we bring decision-making closer to the residents and team members? And that's an Eden alternative principal as well. So a lot of it, the problems were me, right? I took it and continually, right? You're always learning and always making mistakes and always trying to grow in that area.
Just like anybody, breaking old habits and old ways of thinking and consistently going with new, you keep stumbling along the way, but eventually you get there.
Yeah.
Good, good. So one more question before we move on. Just recently, you shared a comment that I thought was interesting and that I wanted to give you a chance to elaborate on or speak to our audience today about. And that was the book that I shared at the beginning, in the book that you wrote. You mentioned that while you wrote the book for senior living professionals, you get more feedback and questions actually from residents at communities than from professionals.
Yeah.
Anything with you? You've got an audience here today. Anything you'd like to share with them?
Well, my takeaway from that is today we're talking about what does the future need to be. And it's not the future. It's not the baby boomers coming in. It is, but it's the people there now. And so I get calls from resident associations at different communities. I have individuals reaching out to me, and they are saying, we want what you wrote about in your book. We feel like, or people will say, my community feels paternalistic. I don't have opportunities for meaningful purpose here. We don't have an opportunity to have influence on the community. We want these things that are in your book. And for me, it was just like, wow, I did not intend for that to be the audience. But what it tells me is that people are demanding something different already, and we should be paying attention to that. So that's what I wanted to share. There might be, for people out there listening, there might be folks in your communities who are reaching out, and are we creating an environment for people to talk about these things?
Yeah, and just before I transition over to Andy, just want to share that, over, my time, particularly the last 10, 12 years or so, I've come across more and more communities that kind of inherently embrace this kind of attitude and approach without putting a label on it or anything. And Horizon House in Seattle, Carroll Woods in Chapel Hill, a lot of the Kendall and Quaker communities along the East Coast, and others that take pride that this is like Horizon House in Carroll Woods. They take pride that they do not have an activities coordinator. They don't want the word activities used. It's if you come to the community with an interest or focus and passion and you want to explore it, do it, make it happen. Other people are going to share that with you. And we have 50, 60 different groups that are all run by the residents. And that's that drive, that's that purpose. There's another community, you talked about the gardening, Londonderry, in not far from Hershey, Pennsylvania. The residents do all the mowing and everything as well. And there's an interesting twist on the whole citizenship model that I think, we won't go down that path right now, but I think could help us in the field with some of our affordability challenges. There are new communities opening up in Boston I think it's called Opus by Two Life. And new residents are required to volunteer 10 hours a week into the community. And this provides a lot of the infrastructure and labor, honestly, to run the community at no cost. So it creates an opportunity for us to offer a more moderate income product by tapping into this resource we have. Again, not a path to go down on now, but there's some ramifications of this beyond just filling in the community. And
there, Rob, there are a number of organizations who have been doing this for a long time, and it's in their DNA. And so, great examples out there. And I love what Opus.
Rob and Jill, if I can add on then, and Rob, you can tell me the mix of our private sector folks, which we have a lot of respect for, and our not-for-profits on this call, but it's usually more not-for-profits. What you and Jill just described, and then with Andrew on the university side, is very not-for-profit centric. That is part of the not-for-profit advantage that I challenge everyone to build out at their organizations. And then it takes on a life and personality of each organization. So with Jill as the leader, and everything you're doing is going to run through your organization, Jill, and it can make a big difference. I was at Londonderry, Rob, last week when I was talking about Lancaster area. and they were talking about everyone participating on landscaping, et cetera. We were at Opus about 3 months ago, and that really works, and it's full. So what our not-for-profits can do from single sites up to multis is build out the not-for-profit advantage that creates the community and culture that you guys described. That is a massive difference. It's palpable when you walk in providers that have an average entry age of 78 to 82 as opposed to 84 to 86. Nothing against that. My mom's 93, for example, at a villa. You can feel the difference. And that's where not-for-profits have an advantage, but they need to add more units in order to keep providing that. You see your one question, it asks saying that everything in North Carolina is full. So that's why we're challenging people, at least do the expansions and then try and add more to your footprint and transfer people in the home. But when you go in those communities, those seniors that are, or people that are choosing that want that. They want that interaction and participation. Jill, I would say I'm guessing that's the case at your campuses in Metro Denver. They could easily be at home or be at one of those for-profit rentals, but they're choosing CLC.
They always say community, right? It's a community, and that's why I'm here. Yeah.
So quick correction, and thank you to Matt Thornhill out there in our audience that I caught my misspeaking about Opus when I said it was 10 hours of volunteer a week. It's not, it's 10 hours a month. I knew that, I just misspoke. So, but thank you for clarifying that for us.
And they're 100% full with the waiting list.
And they're just open. So it's incredible. So Andy, before I come over to you, I just wanted to share one more thing with everyone here. You know, our target is usually to wrap up the presentation part of things by 1, and then we go into Q&A after that. I can tell by the clock right now we're having great discussion already, and we still have Andy and Ted to go. So we are not going to try and pressure you into wrapping up by 1 o'clock. We want to make sure each of you gets the opportunity. If some of our audience members do need to drop off at 1, just a reminder, you will get the recording of this. You'll be able to catch up on any parts you missed, but I can tell we're going to go a little bit over on that part right now. So just wanted everybody to know that. So Andy, you gave a little bit of a background on this, of course, earlier. And many of us have known the importance of lifelong learning, to people that move into our communities. But URCs take things to a totally different level. Can you share a little bit more about some of the kinds of relationships and things that truly differentiate URCs from other communities?
Sure. I mean, look, the biggest differentiator is they're the only intergenerational model. I mean, let's just cut to the chase here. We talked about 10% market penetration for 30 or 40 years. What's the number one barrier to entry in senior living? It's not that the communities aren't nice. It's not that the people living in them don't have very high satisfaction rates once they get there. The issue has been that they don't move in. And how many sons and daughters have I talked to that everyone here has talked to? It's, I can't get mom or dad to move in because they don't want to live with those old people, even though they're the same age as the people in the community. I mean, this has probably been the single biggest barrier to entry, not affordability, not what they offer, not anything else. And then, frankly, when they do move in, it is actually people their age, and it is kind of an elderly island, even if it's a nice one. What we see with URCs is they break that barrier because they're the only intergenerational model, not only intergenerational, but literally a college campus with college kids. And we know that, people have very powerful memories, a thing called the reminiscence bump, which is true, that says our most powerful memories are formed between the ages of about 18 and 25, which is when we went to college, which is why we've been wearing that sweatshirt for 50 years, which is why when a URC opens, we want to live there, because we feel that. So it's a very powerful draw as a differentiator. And again, if you're talking about the only long-term strategy is to evolve your product, it's about differentiating. It's about taking what existed and making it better, right? Steve Jobs didn't invent the cell phone. He invented a better one. Howard Schultz didn't invent coffee. He invented better coffee. And people were lined up outside the door. So if you look at this as a differentiator, breaking down what's the barrier to entry, first and foremost, they break down the number one barrier to entry, which is to remove the stigma that it's an elderly island, even if they're not really correct about that. But in a way, they are. And then the second thing is, I think what Jill was talking about is engagement, all of the amenities. You can access literally hundreds of millions of dollars of university amenities, from athletics to visual performing arts to facilities to grounds to shared services. And you're doing that on the university dime. I mean, think about that if you're a business person. Think about that if you're an investor. Or as I've told many university presidents, you have something in your bookstore that all of your competitors' marketing budgets combined can't match. And they would say, well, what's that? And I would say, well, it's a $20 t-shirt with your school's name on it. I mean, the power of these URCs to draw in people, to be that differentiated product in the market, and to really break down the barriers to entry is enormous. Now, we can talk a little bit about how complicated that can be, because it is quite complicated, as it turns out. But the power of it, if you can tap into that, is actually everything we're talking about on this call. How do we get from 10% to more? Why are we leaving 90% on the table? Why did Howard Schultz figure out that people would pay $4 for a cup of coffee if you just made better coffee? And so this is what we're talking about with URCs.
Great, thanks. And before we shift into a more detailed question for you, just there's a point of clarification that I think might be helpful to some of our audience members. I know it was for me. I used to generically use the term UBRC or University-Based Retirement Community for any community that had any connection or affiliation.
Yeah.
And you helped very politely and professionally, thank you, bring my attention to the fact that UBRC is one kind of a university retirement community. Maybe would you like to elaborate on that a little bit for our audience?
Yes, and thank you for asking. Look, 20 years ago, I think 2005, 2006, I actually published an article where I defined a university-based retirement community, but it was very clear that they had to meet 5 criteria. And again, this kind of goes back to my strategic planning days, but I had done this research, investigated these communities, and basically laid out the 5 things that really made them work or not work at the highest level. And so it was very 5 specific criteria we can talk about. But basically, my point was, is if you could meet all 5, then you would be operating basically the most highly integrated model, right? Programmatically, operationally, culturally, and we can talk about that. And this was published. Beyond that, most of the major industry published it, repeated it. Some national media repeated it. But unfortunately, a lot of people just grabbed onto the UBRC and started calling themselves UBRCs. And number one, it's copyrighted. You can't do that. It's like calling yourself Kentucky Fried Chicken without the secret ingredients. But then what I did a few years ago, I created this website, universityretirementcommunities.com. And as part of that, I created a certification program. Several years ago, I actually wrote as a consultant for J.D. Power and Associates the first senior living certification program for senior living communities. So it's not like I hadn't done it before. So I created a certification program, 100 points, using the 5 criteria, a bunch of substandards. But long story short, you can now be certified, and now it's trademarked. So we're really just trying to bring structure to this. I know it wasn't intentional on the part of anyone, but a UBRC moving forward is actually a trademark designation, not just a copyrighted term. It's trademarked and only for communities that meet the certification. We have certified a few communities. We can talk about that. We have more coming. And what we're trying to do is bring structure to this kind of evolving sector. Bring more structure to it, more definition for retirees first and foremost, but also for developers and universities, and then moving forward, really designating the best in class. And, the best in class are the ones that are certified. So thanks for asking about it. We can talk more about it if you want.
Great. Now, I know a lot of people out there, I'm sure, certain that there are a lot of people with us today are at communities that have been around for a long time. They are not immediately next door. They don't have a neighbor that's a college or university. What are the opportunities available for an organization like that? Obviously, they could start a new community, a satellite or a totally new community. But for those that really want to try and build on this concept, but they don't have an immediate neighbor, what's available for them? What would you share with them?
I mean, look, you can do it. You can build from scratch, obviously, and a lot of them are doing that. I do a lot of consulting with universities who are building from scratch, or senior living providers partnering with them. building from scratch. But there's a lot out there that are just kind of organically formed relationships. I'm actually consulting with my alma mater, George Washington University here in Washington, D.C., and been working for the last year with a new community, a Maplewood luxury community about a mile away called Inspire. I've been working with them for the last year to broker these connections into GW. Now, Inspire was going to build there no matter what. They took an old historic hotel and renovated it, did a beautiful job. But they're making these connections so that they can be a URC. So if you're in a market and you have access to a university, it can be complicated. I have the advantage of having spent 20 years at these universities. You need to know the touch points, the gatekeepers, who to get to, how to get through the bureaucracy. But you can broker connections. You can identify them. There's sometimes dozens and dozens of them. Pare it down to the ones you think make the most sense and try to make that connection, because again, you're tapping into a resource in your community that has hundreds of millions of dollars worth of value and resources that are perfectly willing to work with you in most cases to access those for your residents. So we can talk more about that, but it is doable.
All right.
I'll just add before I drop off, Andrew.
Yep.
And in fact, I know I keep saying we're going to market. We have a busy December. We're going to market Thursday with Messiah Village, which is adjacent to Messiah College in Pennsylvania. It'll meet your standard for the very direct affiliation. Mm-hmm. But with the challenges with private higher ed around the country, and Pennsylvania is a great example. There could be our existing providers could be reaching out to colleges and universities, but in particular the smaller private,
yes,
and building adjacent to them and accomplishing all the synergies you mentioned. We've suggested that to some of our multi-facility clients, maybe have a division or have a umbrella that focuses on that for your growth. It just hasn't taken hold because we went from the Great Recession and then the pandemic. But with your effort and with the awareness that the college-linked university or CCRC LPCs are all full around the country, it's a perfect time to start the initiative again.
It really is. And just to be clear, and you can go to my website and find a link. There's actually 3 categories of certification. The highest is UBRC, but you can also be a university linked retirement community or a university affiliated retirement community, ULRC, UARC. They're all trademarked. But we're trying to bring structure to this. First of all, retirees have a right to know. People will move 1,000 miles for this, not 10 miles. So they have a right to know how well connected it is. But there are other options if you can't meet the highest level to still be connected, to still get certified, to still let people know what you do. To Dan's point, some of these smaller colleges may not offer everything that the larger ones do. We're very specific on the criteria, but it can be done. I would say half of my consulting in the last 20 years has been to new projects, new builds, intentionally built URCs, as I call them. But the other half have been organic URCs that have been in the market, have realized that they could make some connection, like I'm doing with GW, like I'm doing with some other schools. You know, you can make these connections. You have to have an inside knowledge of universities. It's not just, knock on the door and they'll do it. You have to really know how to get in there. Unfortunately, I spent enough time at universities to figure this out, but you have to know how to get through the bureaucracy and get to the people who can really make those connections and make it work. But it is absolutely doable, even with a smaller college.
Yeah, now would be a great time. Thanks, everyone. Caitlin will take it from here for me. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Dan. Really appreciate you joining us. One last quick comment before I transition over to Ted. We've been working for the last couple of years with Edenwald, as I know you helped them a little bit at the beginning, Andy, as they were exploring their relationship with Goucher College. And we probably started 10% pre-sales, I think in late July, might have been the last week of July, and had hit the 70% pre-sales goal on 126 new residences by the end of September. And it's over 90% sold at this point, and they're hoping for 100% sold by the end of the year. And these are not inexpensive residences. And not everyone has the benefit of literally a shared border with a college that they can, develop that relationship with. But I just really think that illustrates the power that these communities have. So, okay, Ted, we're actually past one, but again, I'm not going to slow you down at all. I appreciate your patience as we've gotten around to this point. I want to give you a full opportunity as well. And kind of like there were some reasons I wanted Jill to go first. There's the reason I held on to you till the end of the three. And that's because I think a longevity community may be more different from most existing life plan communities than either a citizenship model community or a university retirement community would be. Because as I remember from hearing you talk in our conversations over the last few years, it's not a life plan community with a nice wellness program. That's not it at all. It goes a lot deeper than that. And so take a little bit of time, if you would, and really bring to life what a longevity community is and what it may offer that's really different.
And I think I would take a different perspective. I think it's very easy to evolve from a life plan community into a longevity community because the community element is what makes it special. It's just one of the differences is, hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent by life plan communities and other communities on wellness programming. And a lot of that programming is great, but the real challenge with it is it hasn't been measurable, and it also doesn't look at the full range of issues related to wellness. And so longevity communities, the foundation is scientific wellness, which is a concept that's coming out of the Buck Institute for Research on Aging. Leroy Hood, who's one of the gods of biology, and Nathan Price wrote a book, The Age of Scientific Wellness. And their point is our healthcare system is reactive, but now it is possible to be very proactive and predictive about the risk factors that somebody has. So the first thing longevity communities will do is do a complete assessment, blood work and everything else, of risks, because sometimes wellness could be as simple as fighting a deficiency of vitamin D3 in the blood, right, or whatever it is, or in terms of risk of dementia, risk of all sorts of things. A lot has to do with what's in your blood too. So you do an assessment of lifestyle, you do a assessment of biology, including genealogy, to find risks, and then you can come up with a personalized recommendation how that person can reduce their risk. And there's a concept called digital twins, where they take your biology, your lifestyle, and a cognitive assessment, and they can actually do a digital twin of you and do thousands of scenarios against an anonymized database of health records, and essentially do things like predict the mean time to dementia that you have and your average. So, but you can take that and you can make lifestyle changes and push that mean time out. There was a big study this year called the U.S. Pointer Study of 2,300 people, and they showed that structured programming can significantly improve cognitive health for people at risk of dementia. And in senior living, virtually everybody's at risk of dementia, or a lot of people are. So longevity communities are leveraging rigorous science, and then coming up with programming to make it easy and fun to do what you need to do. So that's one difference. The low-hanging fruit, as it turns out, and I know, Rob, you've done a lot of research on this. If I'm a life plan community and I say, I want to make the transition to a longevity community, what should I do first? What I would suggest is a scientific wellness-based cognitive enhancement club, because the one thing that the silent generation and the baby boomers have in common, based on research, including Love and Company research, is that they don't want to get dementia. And as I said, there's a lot of science now that can show how lifestyle changes can significantly improve your cognitive health. So what we're doing now with a pilot project out at Sequoia Living, and one that we're also in process with Rose Villa up in Portland, is doing a pilot brain boosters program as a step to a longevity community where you leverage scientific wellness and the huge advantage of having a community to create an environment where people can easy and fun to improve cognitive health. And one thing about it, in terms of the 10%, is both of these organizations are at very high occupancy. So one of the reasons why they're doing this is to serve waitlist people and actually potentially people in the overall community, so they can expand the reach of their programming to encompass more people. So scientific wellness is key, and measurability. See, right now you do the wellness programming in the industry, and there's no measurability. You're not able to say, I mean, I know that Nick has tried to do some research about how much longer you live in a life plan community, but measuring it scientifically is now possible, right? They can measure biological age of your cognitive health, of your immune health, of your muscular health. They can do all that now, and we might as well leverage all that science, because the main reason for everybody, especially the not-for-profit companies that are on this call, is that it serves our mission, right? If we can make it easier and more enjoyable for people to improve their cognitive and overall health, that's consistent with our mission. And the enjoyable part, by the way, comes from the unique advantage of the community, because you can create social environments. You can create teams, like what we're doing in the Brain Boosters program is you create teams that get to name themselves, whether it's the wise owls or the neuro nerds, and they're going to compete with each other for the coveted NeuroStar Cup. So you make it fun, you make it social, and social is also important for cognitive health, as it turns out. You surround it with things like better food, right, and brain healthy snacks and education. And you can, again, the hypothesis is, we're working on pilots now, you can actually measurably improve cognitive health. And there have been studies that show that, but we think we can get even better results in the senior living context because of the community factor.
All right. Thank you. You use the term scientific wellness a lot. I've heard the term precision medicine referred to. Are they synonymous, or is there a difference?
Well, they are related. So scientific wellness is approach. There's 4 P's to scientific wellness. Predict disease so you can prevent it, right? You can see Alzheimer's coming 20 years in advance if you look for certain biomarkers. And then, the key is, participation. People need to participate and personalized recommendations. So the personalized recommendations, which is the 3rd P, is essentially precision medicine, right? But it's also not just medicine. It's, precision recommendation. Again, it might be a supplement because you have a very low omega-3 index, or, so it's precision recommendations based on your biology. And again, our healthcare system doesn't do that. They do a few tests. The annual checkup doesn't look at many biomarkers. They never talk to you about cognitive health. But if you get a lot more data, you can make much better recommendations. And then you can deliver on those recommendations with programming in a gamified way to make it more fun.
All right, great. Thank you. So I do want to try and do 2 things real quick to take us to the end, and then open up for questions, so we have a little bit of time for that before we try and wrap up about 1:30. The first one is about obstacles, and the second one is just key takeaways for each of you. And maybe we'll try and aim for like 30 seconds to a minute each on these. But let's start with key obstacles. And everybody can probably tell, I hope at this point, that I'm a huge fan of all three of models of what we're talking about. I would like to move into a longevity community that has a strong connection to a university, ideally University of Virginia, just saying, and it has a really strong empowerment and meaning thing. But as great as the concepts are, it's not just a piece of cake to make the transition, as Jill in particular talked a little bit about. So if each of you were to say briefly, what's the biggest obstacle that if a community really wanted to pursue your model, what's the biggest obstacle they should be prepared to face? Ted, let's come back to you first.
Well, we did a survey at the Sequoia community, and 93% said they were interested in joining the Brain Boosters Club. 75 said very interested. But you always have residents that have concerns. And so obviously that is something that we all work with in an existing community context. And you have team members that, for whatever reason, they have a huge emotional stake in the way things have been done. And so, in general, those are obstacles, and certainly being innovative. Our industry a lot of times is fairly ponderous, and, you have to innovate, right? And in the case of longevity communities and the Brain Boosters program, the other thing that you need to do is not just do the programming, but integrate that into your overall messaging, both on the marketing and sales front, to make it successful. In other words, if you're going to become a longevity community, and if you take the step with a Brain Boosters program, you need to educate your prospects and your residents and your wait list about it. And so it's not just a program that sits over in the corner. It's a whole change to the philosophy of the organization and how it presents itself to the marketplace.
Great. Thank you. So Jill, we'll come to you next. And you did talk about this a little bit, but just give you an opportunity to summarize, what do you think the biggest obstacle is to a community really wanting to embrace and move forward with the citizenship model?
I think it's the human nature that we want quick fixes. And we want, let's get this new technology, or let's do something where we can check off the box. And similar to what Ted said, this is adaptive work. It's not a program. When you're asking people to change the way they think and they behave, it takes a long time. And then the other thing I would say is community is super messy, right? So look at our country, right? Citizenship is messy. And so you have to have that grit and determination to work your way through and know when things get messy, that's a celebration. And that's not when you give up. You keep going.
Can I ask a question? So Jill, do you often feel like you need to change the team members, or in terms of some people have an administrative frame of mind that doesn't lend itself well to the citizenship model?
I think, and this goes along with a question that Wendy put up there about people not liking change. And I would just say it's not just residents that don't like change. None of us like change. And so I always remind people to think about that diffusion of innovation model, that bell curve, that you're always going to have some people who are super excited about this, and you're always going to have at the other end what they're called the laggards, right? People who are like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. And you want to focus your energy on the people who are excited about it. Ted, to answer your question, if you have a leader, like an executive director in one of your communities, or a key leader, or even a resident council leader who is not on board with what you're trying to drive, that's a problem. And so sometimes you do have to make those changes. But I think in general, it's once it becomes, this is the way we do things around here, everybody else gets on board at some point, right? It takes some people longer than others. Thanks for that question.
Right. Thanks. Andy, your turn. One key obstacle you think people should be prepared for if they want to transform into a URC?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest obstacle is these are two completely different organizations. I mean, you can't find a bigger odd couple than big bureaucratic universities in the world of 20-year-olds and fast-moving senior living providers working hard every day to take care of 80-year-olds. So they don't speak the same language. The biggest advantage I've had is somehow I ended up fluent in both languages, but honestly, half the time I feel like the UN translator in these conversations. They don't understand each other. First and foremost, you have to get to the university. They don't know what we do for a living. They really don't. And to be more honest, they're actually kind of ageist. They actually don't kind of kick back a little bit when you talk about bringing retirees to campus. I've seen that happen, ironically. But they need to see the opportunity. I have an initial go, no go presentation. I provide kind of an assessment. I'll go in there and walk them through this, the president, the provost, the board, who's ever in the room. Actually, you've kind of seen it, Rob. I did it at Goucher. But basically what I'm trying to do is get them up to speed to see the opportunity and, and again, the pluses and minuses. And then I have a 21-point strategic rubric. I score them. I tell them what kind of potential they offer. And frankly, if they score way too low, that's probably not the right opportunity for them. So I do a lot of that. And then on the flip side, it's the senior living providers, my industry, people I've known for 30 years. They have to have the patience of Job on this. These universities are not going to move fast. This is not something that you're just going to flip it and go. You have to be willing to work with the bureaucracy. You have to be willing to understand it's going to take some time. Now, if you are willing to invest, you have to have a true partnership. You just can't take their T-shirt and their brand and call it a day. That's not right. You have to have a true partnership and really get in there and work hard at it. If you do, then I would return to my point, which is you probably will be the number one choice in that market for decades. But it's a real commitment, and it's not for everybody, to be honest. It's not for every university, and it's not for every senior living provider.
All right, great. So the last thing before we shift to Q&A, real quick, there's one thing that you really want our audience to take away from what you individually, each of you have shared today. What would that one thing be? Andy, I'll let you go first.
I think the biggest thing I've seen with these URCs is their ability to literally reverse aging. And that's empirical. That's not even hypothetical. I talked about the reminiscence bump and our powerful memories that are formed in our 20s. But there's another documented thing called the counterclockwise effect that says if you put people in past environments, they actually physically grow younger. That's actually been documented. So I think the biggest power I've seen with URCs is, and I've seen it even when I visit them, the residents are about the same age as any other life plan traditional community. They look a decade younger. Now, I don't know if it's because they come in healthier or better or whatever, but they're much more active, much more engaged. And I think it's the power of the reminiscence bump. It's the power of the counterclockwise effect. I think that this is a study that needs to be, I've actually talked to a professor at Harvard who actually invented the counterclockwise theory. And she has said that she thinks it's probably dead on. But I think that there's a study that can be done to show that people who move into these communities actually may not only slow aging, but at some level reverse some of the aspects of aging, just putting them in past environments where the old you're as young as you feel, where they actually feel younger and actually become younger. It's quite powerful, more than we can get into today, but that has been the thing that has really jumped out at me. And you can see why then they would be attracted to that. Intuitively, they see this, they feel it, even if empirically they haven't measured it.
Great, thank you. Jill, let's come to you next. So there's one thing you would want our audience to take away from what you've shared today. What would that be?
That we need to start with ourselves. And it is, with so much negativity about aging around us, it's impossible that we aren't seeing our jobs and the way we design communities and the way we do everything through some sort of lens of ageism. And so I think it's really important that we try to clear that lens and look at everything in a new way, in a more age positive view. And it really starts to shift the way you see our work in our communities.
Great, thank you. And Ted, what one thing would you want our audience to take away from what you shared today?
Well, I'm going to do personal and professional. On a personal level, talking to all of you, If you haven't had a calcium score, get one, because people die of heart attacks all the time that is unnecessary because they didn't know they had a problem. So that's personal. On a professional basis, I would say that you can serve your mission by moving towards a longevity community, by implementing scientific wellness-based programming, and the low-hanging fruit is related to brain health and cognitive improvements.
Great, thank you. And Ted, I will thank you in another way. You, among other things, did inspire me to retake a calcium score recently, about a week and a half ago. And it was, the new one is 27, which actually is pretty good, but the old one was 5 years ago. So I'm not exactly trending in the right direction, but it's very helpful to know, and that makes you think about your life choices. So I very much agree. That's a really important thing for people to know. So Caitlin, you've been in the background quiet this whole time, ready to step in for Dan. And on behalf of Ziegler, from everything you've heard today, you could almost speak as an audience member since you haven't really been participating. But what one thing of everything you've heard today would you want our audience to take away?
I think the biggest thing is growth. As Dan was mentioning, yes, it's risky, but even if it's through your new locations, expansions, M&A, even potentially including additional service lines like HCBS, we have the high occupancy, we have the demand, and now's the time. And let's also get in there and do that construction when the nonprofits are able to beat out that for-profit area. So it's just very basic growth.
Great, thanks. All right, we're going to shift over to Q&A here, and I'm going to attempt to bring up the question and discussion slide so everybody can see your emails. If we run out of time here and you have questions you want to share with anyone, all right, I think that's up there. So they've got your contact information. But we're going to start with one you referenced a moment ago, Jill, and it is totally in your lane, and it's about messy citizenship. As leadership is looking to the future, current residents do not always share the same ideas for growth or change moving forward, and are often very resistant to change. How do leaders navigate this with a citizenship model? Ultimately, leadership has to make hard decisions to secure the future strength of the community, and that will not always result in 100% residents' consensus.
Yeah, and that's okay, right? Not everybody. There are some people that'll say, I've done all this my whole life. I'm done doing for other people, and I'm not going to participate. That's okay, but you can't. And the same. We talked a little bit about team members. You can't have people actively undermining what you're trying to do, right? If somebody's just choosing for themselves that's the way they want to live their life, that's great. I think the other thing that's really important is when we talk about citizenship and being an impactful member of your community, it might be big things and it might be little things. So in one of our communities, people said, stop calling this volunteer time. I'm just looking out for my neighbors. I'm just part of something. Stop labeling it as volunteering, right? And so I think sometimes you have to listen to some of those things too. But yeah, you do have to move forward. And again, it's not just older people that don't like change. None of us really like change. And the other thing I always remind people of is, that whole story of when hand washing was introduced as a way to stop infection, the spread of infection. Everybody thought that doctor that brought that up was crazy. And he was mocked, and people were like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And so anytime you introduce something new, you're going to have people that aren't on board with it, and that's okay. Focus your energy on the people that are excited about it, and they will drive that change. Find key resident leaders that are on board, and they will make things happen more than you ever could.
Great, thank you. Another question Jill, I may give you the opportunity to go first here, and I know I have some fairly strong feelings about this, but I'll bite my tongue for a minute. And the question is, what do you see the impact of continuing care at home programs to be, as they can fill the need for services while people stay at home? You have a program, right? You have home care.
We have home care, yes.
Right.
And that's not continuing care at home, right? There's a lot more wraparound services that provides. So I might not be the right person to ask, because I think the whole idea that everyone can be successful aging in place in their home is dangerous. And we're setting up a lot of people for failure if we do not find the path to engagement, social engagement, and meaningful purpose. And what I'm concerned about is more people, what you might call rotting in place at home. Now, I know there are programs out there that do this and do it well. We do not offer that. We have home care at this point in time, which is not enough to keep people engaged, right? We provide care, but there's a lot more we can do.
Right. And I'll try to be brief, knowing we've only got like a minute plus left, but I really like the concept of continuing care at home. We've done a lot as a company to try and support that over the years. However, I think there are a number of challenges with the product that limit the market for it. What I've seen, this is just trying to figure out how to digest this down to something quick. Friends Life Care out of Pennsylvania has more than 2,000 members. They have a totally different membership model than everybody else. Any other community organization has struggled to get more than about 400. I think there's a lesson to be learned there for the field about contract options, things, and what consumers really want and what they're willing to pay for. And that care coordination that is a key facet of the core model that's the Friends Life Care contract. I think there's a lesson there to be learned that a lot of our other organizations can evolve what they offer in terms of continuing care at home. But that's just scratching the surface. I think there's potential for it, but as it lives and exists today, it's not suddenly going to transform overnight and start serving hundreds of thousands of people. We are basically running right up against 1:30. Again, if any of you have, of our audience, have questions you'd like to send to any of us individually on this, we can follow up with you. Please do. I want to thank our panelists again for all the time that they've put into preparing for the blogs that are out there on our website from each, and for coming here and sharing their vision for our future and where we can be as communities. So Ted and Jill and Andy and Caitlin and Dan in absentia, thank you, all of you, for your help along the way. And
thank you. Thank you.
Oh, sure. And to all of our audience members, thank you again for joining us here today. We appreciate all of you. I hope and wish everybody a great holiday season.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.